The populist right is a real threat. Reform UK support is going to grow massively over the next 5 years, meaning that they could potentially win not this upcoming election on July the 4th, but the next one in 5 years' time. Let's start by talking about this upcoming election on July the 4th. I don't think it's any secret that Labour are going to win by a majority. I don't think I need to go too much in depth about this point, but the main reason is that people are just fed up with the Tories and want change. Reform UK are predicted to win between 3 to 15 seats. I wouldn't be surprised if this is towards the higher end. This shows a massive shift in UK politics towards the populist right. However, the most important statistic is not how many seats Reform UK win, but how well they do in the popular vote. With the dwindling support of the Tories, I wouldn't be surprised if Reform UK end up second in the popular vote. Not by a lot, but by 1 or 2%. The main restrictor for Reform in this upcoming election is that unlike more traditional parties, their voter base is spread across the country and not isolated in specific constituencies. The support for Reform UK will grow over the next 5 years, but to see why, we need to understand the rise of the populist right in modern UK politics. The main allure that people say is their desire to vote for the populist right is a growing dissociation with modern politics, led by a lack of action over the last 20 years. Growing inequality has led to increased cost of living, erosion of social cohesion, and reduction in access to basic services. And the UK government has failed to make any reasonable adjustment through legislation to combat this growing inequality. A lesser but still important reason for the growth in the populist right is the UK's shrinking power on the world stage. Coming from a nation that once ruled a third of the world through colonialist means, to now being a much smaller world power, where our individual presence on the world stage has shrunk. We are now no longer able to compete effectively against bigger and more powerful nations. In terms of manufacturing, trade, GDP, military, computing, natural resources, the list goes on. We are now no longer able to compete with the likes of the US and China. But it's a hard pill to swallow for a nation that was once a world-leading superpower. You can see why people are trying to cling on to the idea that one day we can return to such. Because of this, people are more inclined to associate with patriotic and nationalist ideals, which is right in line with the populist right. So the main reasons I've listed for the recent rise of the populist right is growing inequality, a dissociation with modern politics, and the UK's reduced power on the world stage. Now we'll move on to my predictions for the next 5 years, and how the issues we're likely to face will worsen these characteristics, leading to more support for the populist right. To begin, the issues we've faced over the last 5 years are almost guaranteed to get worse. This is because for Labour to make a sustainable improvement to our economy, they need more than one term. The policies they say they want to implement will take time before we see the benefits. Outside issues will worsen, leading to the three characteristics that have led to the rise of the populist right to get worse. The Russian-Ukraine conflict has disrupted trade and is in large part funded by the West. The future of this conflict will go one of three ways: a continuation of funding by the West, which will mean the war will continue; the removing of funding by the West, which will mean Russia will take Ukraine; or a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, which will mean Ukraine will have to give up some of their land. Now, which of these occurs is very dependent on the stance of the United States, who basically dictate the outcome of the situation. Say, for example, Biden gets elected. Here we will see a continuation of the war, as the West attempts to show power over Russia. Doing so will continue to impact trade, and further the issues of the cost of living crisis. If Trump were to get elected, the other two scenarios could play out. I believe Trump will attempt to strike a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, in which Ukraine will have to give up some of their land. I give this a very, very slim chance of happening, as Ukraine giving up their land, for a nation like Ukraine, that will be seen as surrendering. As such, I could see Trump threatening to withdraw funding from the Ukraine conflict as a way to force Ukraine to take a peace deal. But Ukraine will still say no. And with Trump not wanting to appear weak on the world stage, he will do as he says and withdraw funding. Without American funding, European nations will not be able to sustain the war effort in Ukraine, and as such will follow suit and withdraw funding, leading to Russia taking Ukraine. This would be a massive embarrassment for the West on the world stage, and would highlight the UK's shrinking military and economic power. This would also bring Russia closer to the Western European doorstep, increasing the tension of war. Either way, at least one of the three factors will get worse, which will increase the appeal for the populist right. Foreign trade is unlikely to see any major improvements under the Labour government. Keir Starmer spoke about getting a new deal with the EU, but with the restrictions he's put in place of not rejoining the single market and not taking on any more immigrants, will mean his power in negotiations are limited. I do believe a new deal will be made, but the impact to which will not be great. This means that the cost of goods and services will continue to rise just like the last 5 years. Maybe not to the same extent, but they will still continue to do so. The worsening conditions will lead to a further dissociation with modern politics, as those who vote Labour in this upcoming election, having previously voted Tory, will feel as if neither party was able to solve the problems the UK faces. Voters will look elsewhere for a solution, and a party that proposes vastly different economic policy and has a leader that speaks a different political language will seem appealing. Now onto my final and most important point for the next 5 years, the advancement of artificial intelligence. We are at the bottom of the bell curve. The advancements in AI are going to be massive over the next 5 years, to the point where they will be commonplace in UK businesses. In particular, within work traditionally done in an office with the assistance of a computer. The effects of this are those that are capable in the use of AI will be able to deliver the same output as multiple employees. Businesses will be able to reduce their costs by taking on less employees, but still delivering the same output. The extent of this will depend on how much AI develops over the next 5 years. I suggest that over 80% of UK office jobs will be replaced by AI. Of course, many jobs will not be affected by these advancements of AI. Construction work, teachers, caregivers, basically anything hands-on or that requires face-to-face interaction will not be affected by AI in the short term, but a lot of jobs will. We will see mass unemployment and a constriction on the welfare system, and AI advancements are not going to slow down anytime soon. Slowly but surely, as advancement in AI and robotics, more and more job types will be affected by the advancement of AI. Year on year, we'll see an increase in unemployment, a deepening of inequality, and an increase to the support of the populist right. Furthermore, we'll see the consumer base across the world shrink, as many remain unemployed and others have to get low-paying manual jobs in order to survive. A small consumer base is unworkable in our current economic system. As such, government action will be necessary. Which leads me to another prediction. Universal Basic Income, UBI. UBI is the idea that everybody, no matter their income or employment status, is given a monthly allowance by the government. This will not be a lot of money, but it will cover basic food and basic housing while leaving a small amount to be spent in the consumer market. It's my belief that the next election, in 5 years' time, every party will be trying to implement UBI. Each party will have its different form and amount that each citizen gets. However, every party will be trying to implement it in some way. It will take such prevalence in the political debate that the next election will be dubbed the UBI election. Although Reform UK has taken a very aggressive anti-welfare approach to the July 4th election, it wouldn't surprise me if in the next election they're the party offering the highest amount of UBI per month. A figure that will be economically unsustainable and too high for any other party to match. Individuals will see the higher number without seeing the economic implications and vote reform. I've gone over my predictions for the next 5 years and how we will see a further shift towards the populist right. But now let's talk about why the populist right is a threat. The populist right has a tendency to present policy that appears to be for the working man, but in the long run, it hurts them. An example of this is Reform UK's proposal to increase the tax threshold to £20,000, spouting figures that 7 million workers will no longer have to pay tax, or that it will give individuals £1,500 more in their pocket. While having this extra income may seem appealing to the majority, in reality, it will have a detrimental effect. We all hate paying tax and we all love complaining about it. But it is a necessary evil. By increasing the threshold by such an extreme amount, public services will not receive the funding they desperately need. It will cost the working man more in the long run. Populist politicians have been shown to undermine our democratic systems by forcing policy through the use of emergency powers. This sets a very dangerous precedent. As soon as one party uses emergency powers, others will follow suit, until eventually it becomes the norm. This will harm our democratic integrity. Of course, emergency powers are needed in a specific context, but the populist right will abuse it. The populist right has an undertone of anti-scientific beliefs, the most dangerous of which is Reform's policy to scrap net zero. They support this policy with claims that it will protect UK jobs and that the UK can support itself with natural resources. The truth is, more jobs will be created than lost in the move to green energy, and as supply for natural resources decreases, prices increase. So for a more affordable future, green energy is the solution. More time and energy will be spent in Parliament and in the media discussing social politics, and not on more pressing economic concerns, distracting from important debates and stifling change in more important areas. And finally, the populist right want to defund and eventually abolish the NHS. The absolute crown jewel of what it means to be British will erode under a populist right government. Don't get me wrong, the NHS needs serious improvement, but under the populist right, we will take the first step in copying the expensive American insurance-based medical system, which leaves so many, especially those less well off, unwell, untreated, and unable to get help. For this question, I don't have a lot of answers. I'd love to give a list of 10 things we can do to prevent the rise of the populist right, which I may do in another video. But for now, the main bit of advice I can give is to be patient. Be patient with the Labour government, and although things may get worse in the next 5 years, trust they will get better after that. And no matter how bad things get, they will get a lot worse under Reform UK. Thank you for watching.